At the end of 2020, it had basically gotten to a point where from the outside looking in, you would have said, this guy's winning the game. He's doing the things that you're supposed to want to do. But I had this sensation that if that was what winning felt like, I had to be playing the wrong game. My entire definition of success, of what it meant to build a wealthy life, had been incomplete. I was focusing on the one thing at the expense of everything else.
What a Tim Cook, Mel Robbins, and Andrew Huberman and Jason Abrams have in common: we all love Sahil Bloom. Friends, you are about to listen to an author who wrote an incredible book. The book is called The 5 Types of Wealth. It was a New York Times bestseller 7 weeks in a row. It has become a phenomenon with over 1 million people getting his newsletters 4 times a week. He's going to lay out for us the way that he thinks about wealth. Now, this isn't the way that you've heard it before. He breaks wealth into time wealth, social, mental, physical, and financial. He is going to give you a different way to think about your life in almost every major category that matters. Sit back and buckle up. This is Sahil Bloom. And I am joined by a buddy of mine, Sahil Bloom. Sahil, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Dude, I am so glad we're having this conversation because we've been talking on the phone and now we get to share it with the world. I am a wild fan of your book and the way that you think. Everyone that's on this show, I ask them the same thing. How did you find your way into the greatest industry in the world? And of course, I'm talking about real estate. I can't ask you that. What I can ask you is, dude, what happened in your life to get you to a point where you thought this deeply about life? Because, man, one thing about this book, you went deep. So walk me through, how did we get here today?
I spent the first 30 years of my life marching down the very traditional path to what we typically think of as a successful life. I was doing the things that you are told you should want to do. I took the job that sounded impressive for the LinkedIn post and announcement. I got the promotions, the titles, the bonuses. And at every step along that journey for the first 7 years of my career, I convinced myself and became increasingly convinced that my own fulfillment, happiness, contentment as a human being was on the other side of some achievement, some goal, some bonus, some promotion, whatever that thing was. And unfortunately, along that whole journey, while I was getting those things, while I was winning that one very particular game, I started to see other areas of my life falling apart. Most importantly, my relationships. I was living 3,000 miles away from my parents, who, two of my best friends in the world, I wasn't seeing them very often anymore. My sister and my relationship had ground to a halt. And sadly, my wife and I were struggling to conceive at the time, which was creating real strain in our life. You know, I was drinking 6-7 nights a week. My mental and physical health were in disarray. And at the end of 2020, it had basically gotten to a point where from the outside looking in, you would have said, this guy's winning the game. He's doing the things that you're supposed to want to do. But I had this sensation that if that was what winning felt like, I had to be playing the wrong game. And it all came to a head for me with a single conversation. May of 2021, I went out for a drink with an old friend. We sat down and he asked how I was doing. And I told him that it had started to get difficult living so far away from my parents, 3,000 miles away on the East Coast. And he asked how old they were. And I said mid-60s. And he asked how often I saw them. And I admitted that it was down to about once a year. And he just looked at me and said, okay, so you're going to see your parents 15 more times before they die. That was the moment that changed my entire life. It was the gut punch that I needed to hear. It was the realization that my entire definition of success, of what it meant to build a wealthy life, had been incomplete, that I was focusing on the one thing at the expense of everything else. And in the aftermath of that conversation, my wife and I sat down for a very candid discussion about what we wanted to build our life around, what our center really was. And we took a dramatic action. Within 45 days, we had sold our house in California. I had left my fancy high-paying job, and we had moved 3,000 miles across the country to live closer to both of our sets of parents.
Okay, stop the story. Come on, dude. Like, you say that. Were you scared? Like, I get the fact that you had plenty of money, but no, did you have enough? And weren't you freaking out a little bit? You were walking away from everything you had built.
Yeah, you know, look, this is what you characterize as like a leap of faith in life. And when we think of a leap of faith, the reason a leap of faith is so scary, one thing you're going to learn about me, and anyone that reads the book will know, is that I really like deconstructing big things into something that's more manageable mentally and literally. And with a leap of faith, the reason it feels so scary is because you have a whole lot of information and evidence about your ability to live where you currently are, like on your side of this leap. And then on the other side of it, the life that you want, this vision that you have for your future, you have no information and no evidence. Like no evidence that you can actually pay your bills, have responsibilities covered, take care of your people, etc. So what that manifests as, this gap, this asymmetry, it manifests as fear. What I had done unknowingly leading up to that conversation was I had created a whole bunch of evidence that there was a different life that I could build. I had been writing every single day for about a year just because I was pulled towards it. There was energy that I felt for this thing. And that writing and the people that were attracted to it, the people that were coming and soliciting me for ideas and wanting me to consult and do advisory work, there were these things that were happening that had started to seed in my mind this idea that maybe the path that I was on wasn't the only path available to me. So when that lightning strike conversation happened with that friend, when he said 15 more times, while it was scary to make a change, the seeds of that change had been sown over the course of the prior year.
Got it. Okay, so this makes sense to me. So you kind of built enough evidence such that you were willing to take the leap. And we all know how it worked out. I mean, you were on the New York Times bestseller list 7 weeks in a row. Like it's worked out. You've crushed it.
Yeah, it's always hard to say worked out, right? Like the thing that I would say has definitely worked out when I think about the change is that we fundamentally created time. Like that number 15 more times before my parents are gone, it's now in the hundreds, right? I see my parents multiple times a month. They're a huge part of my son, their grandson's life. We had taken an action and fundamentally reassumed agency over our own lives. Convinced ourselves that we were capable of taking an action and creating a desired outcome. And when you think about life in general, when you think about what allows someone to achieve success when other people cannot, it is about agency. It is about believing that you are capable of taking an action and creating a desired outcome. So anything that you can do in your life that reconfirms that in your mind, like we talk about mindset, manifesting, all these words get thrown out. That's all it is. It is just about having an intrinsic belief that you can actually create the change that you want to see in your world through actions, through things that you can actually go do. And we had done that.
I love that. And by the way, you're now getting into time, which is one of the things that we're going to talk about. But as I was thinking about it, and it might be because the book is laid out this way, but my immediate response to I'm going to make a giant change in my life comes to money. I start thinking, well, this is how I make money. This is the business I'm in. This is how I support myself. You go to it early in the book. You say money isn't nothing. It simply can't be the only thing. And you lay out these three premises. Money improves overall happiness at lower levels of income by reducing fundamental burdens and stress. This I think I have. If I have the money to solve a problem, I face a trivial problem. If I don't, the smallest problem becomes the largest one. So that makes sense. Number two, if you have an income above these levels and are unhappy, more money is unlikely to change that, which I think might be the biggest misconception ever. They think more money I have, well, I'll just be happier. I'll have a nicer car or a second country club or a bigger house. And the third one, if you have an income above this baseline and are happy, more money is unlikely to drive increasing happiness. So walk me through this. You solved the money before you got to any of the others. What was your big aha about money?
I mean, the big aha there is that money buys happiness at the lower levels and in the early stages of your life. All the science supports this. Anyone that tells you otherwise is lying or is not well versed in the science. What the science and the research anecdotally and in the data shows is that beyond these lower levels, the sort of linear relationship that exists between incremental units of money and incremental units of happiness no longer holds true. That you can have this world where you continue to chase money, but it is no longer driving those same early of life happiness gains. And so what happens to people is in those early years, they create a pattern in their mind that when the money bell rings, happiness comes. And that pattern is very hard to break. So you've now gotten past the point where it's true, but you still think it's true. You're still convinced. So you keep chasing money all the way to your death, not realizing that it was these other areas of life that were actually going to contribute to the good life that you wanted to build. In other words, money starts out as the goal. It is the thing that you need to drive happiness. Then it has to transition to being a tool rather than the goal. It is a tool to help you build these other types of wealth rather than the goal in and of itself.
It's a huge idea, man. And then you get into these 5 types of wealth. Now, friends, you listen to this show, you know what time it is. We're going to unpack a model right now. You don't have to take the notes. I'm taking the notes. If you're driving 120 in the new Rover, don't take notes. They come out every Thursday. And if you don't get them, go to MREAnotes.com, enter your email address. We send them out to you every Thursday. You have hundreds of thousands of agents out there that are getting it. I want you to get them as well. All right, Sahil, it's the People's Podcast. Tell the people, because you said the money is a tool to go get the 5 types of wealth: time, social, mental, physical, and financial. Walk me through one at a time. What is time wealth?
Time wealth is all about freedom. Freedom to choose how you spend your time, who you spend it with, where you spend it, when you trade it for other things. It is grounded in this realization of time as your most precious asset, the one thing that you cannot get back.
And when you think about it, what are the 1 or 2 hacks? If tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up and start to build my time wealth, what's the first thing I should do?
So I think the first thing that I always tell people to do when it comes to time wealth is, first off, create a front of mind awareness of the fact that time is that most precious asset. So the question that I love to ask people is, would you trade lives with Warren Buffett? Especially financially minded people, by the way, because your reaction is like, oh, sounds great, right? He's worth $130 billion. He's got access to anyone in the world.
He's 117 years old.
Exactly. He's 95 years old. There's no way you would agree to trade the amount of time that he has left for all of that money. And on the flip side, he would give anything to be in your shoes. And so what you are doing with a simple question is creating this awareness that your time has quite literally incalculable value. And yet, on a daily basis, how much of that time are you really wasting? How much of that time are you spending scrolling on your phone, comparing your lives to other people, worrying about the past, stress about the future, anxiety, all of these things that fundamentally disrespect that one most precious asset? So that's the first thing. Bring that awareness to the front of your mind. The second thing that I always tell people to do is to do what I think of, I call it my energy calendar. Create an awareness of how your energy flows in the different activities that you have in your life, different opportunities, different people. Time and energy are sort of intimately connected in the sense that when you are deploying energy into things that create energy in your life, your outcomes follow. So when you are working on like high energy creating tasks, that is when you are going to create the 10, 100, 1000x outcomes that fundamentally create freedom in your life. What you need to do is identify what those things are in the first place, because most people have absolutely no idea that they are spending the vast majority of their time on these energy draining tasks that really aren't moving the needle in their life, whether that's people or whether that's in your professional life.
So I hear you. Figure out the things that give you the asymmetric return, which you explain later in the book. How do I actually do it? Like time calendar, I'm in. What does that look like and what do I do?
So what I do and what I did the first time when I started to try to figure this out is I pulled up my calendar at the end of a Monday and I color coded the things from the day. All of the things that were on the calendar, I color coded them according to if they created energy, meaning I felt lift up during or after it, I marked it green. If it was neutral, I marked it yellow. And if it made me feel physically drained during or after, I marked it red. Do that for a week, 5 days of doing that. And I guarantee at the end of the week, you will have a clear visual perspective on the types of activities that are creating versus draining energy in your life. That allows you to then make slow, steady, incremental changes to prioritize green over red, to amplify the green and try to sort of delegate or eliminate the red. You're never going to get to a point where you have 0 red on your calendar, right? It's a pipe dream, probably not going to happen. But if the ratio of green to red improves, the way you feel and your outcomes are going to change. I guarantee it. Across the board, everyone I've worked with has seen massive improvements from just doing that one simple thing that, frankly, for the course of a week, it probably takes you 5 total minutes to do that type of activity, and it's an enormous ROI.
Brilliant. All right, time I get. You then go on and you discuss this idea of social wealth. What is social wealth?
Social wealth is all about your relationships, right? It is about both the few deep connections to the close circle, and then it is about the breadth of connections to the things that extend beyond the self. You know, your broader circles of relationships, communities, spiritual, local, regional, etc. It is about an understanding that relationships are the single most important predictor of a good life. Like, we know this scientifically. The Harvard study of adult development followed the lives of 2,000 people over the course of 85 years. They found that the single greatest predictor of physical health at age 80 was relationship satisfaction at age 50.
You know, the thing that I thought was amazing about that study is it tracked people across all incomes. I mean, you had at least one sitting president, but you also had people that were working in factories. And that, what you just said, didn't change regardless of their status.
Yeah, it was an amazing study for that exact reason. So it originally was 2 separate studies. There was the study of like the wealthy Harvard students, these Harvard sophomores, and then there was a separate study that was of like studying like juvenile delinquents in Boston, very poor, impoverished families. They ended up combining the 2 studies, so it created a much more robust and comprehensive view of what it means to live a good life. And the truth here, which is hard to admit for a lot of people, is while relationships are scientifically and anecdotally the thing that is going to contribute to the good life we want, they're also the first thing that fall by the wayside when we get busy, right? Like, you get busy at work, a fire's happening, things are happening, and you stop texting the friend. You don't get together with your sibling for that walk or that coffee. You don't call your mom. You don't get that old group of buddies together for the annual trip because life has gotten complicated. And that really is the thing we should be prioritizing. It is this total dislocation of priorities in our lives.
This makes perfect sense to me. So once I come to grips with this concept, how do I put it into action in my life? And by the way, what you said earlier about the time hack, we have a great friend of ours. He works at Keller Williams. His name is Brian Gubernick, and he did a TED Talk on this idea of hacking time and calculating the time you have left with your family and your kids. If you haven't seen it, go Google Brian Gubernick TED Talk. Friends, you will love it. So, Sahil, what do I do tomorrow to start getting clear on my social relationships?
I really think that the first thing that anyone can do is just make a rule that when you think something nice about someone, you're going to let them know right then. Again, 0 time cost to doing something like this, but makes a dramatic difference.
Why?
It's like, we think about things all during the course of the day. You're like, oh man, Jason, I really liked the way that he said that nice thing about his friend. But then we just let it fly by us. And what happens is you show up at that person's funeral someday and you say, oh man, Jason he was just so kind and giving towards others. He always had a nice thing to say about his friends and about these other people. We have to share those flowers with people while they're still around. Because the truth is that those simple, tiny actions, those little investments that you can make, if you will, in your social wealth, compound meaningfully over the course of your life. The tiny thing that you do today is going to stack and compound in the same way that putting away a little bit of money today is going to stack and compound. The same investment mindset about these areas of life compounding applies to relationships just as much as it does to your money.
I love that. Okay, so number one, I'm going to actually tell the people the stuff I'm thinking when it's kind as I'm thinking it. That seems to be the key there. Anything else I can do?
The second thing I would say is really get judicious about identifying the positive versus negative or demeaning relationships in your circle. We allow too many toxic or even ambivalent relationships to persist in our lives. I have this exercise in the book I talk about as like a relationship map, mapping the quality of a relationship and the frequency of those relationships to try to get a better sense for who are the people that I really should be investing in and who are the people that I need to be pulling back and away from.
Okay, give me the quick rundown on how do I go build that map?
So it's just a 2x2 matrix, right? Like you would have on the y-axis, you would have the frequency of an interaction from like very low frequency at the bottom to very high frequency. You see the person a lot at the top. And then on the x-axis, you would have the quality of that relationship from toxic, meaning they're constantly making you feel bad, to very supportive, meaning they're lifting you up, they're making you think bigger. And ambivalent is in the middle. All you want to do is just think about, okay, the 20 or so relationships that you would consider in your circle, where do they all fit on that map? You know, like if you were to reflect and think about those people, where do you think they exist? And what that allows you to do is get this visual perspective pretty quickly on who are the people that like, oh, they're very supportive, but I just don't see them enough. I don't get together with that person enough, but I always feel great when I do. Well, pretty clear signal that you might want to lean into that relationship more. Maybe you should spend more time with them. Similarly, you're going to identify people where it's very toxic or it's very ambivalent, meaning they're sometimes supportive, sometimes demeaning. And I'm just seeing them all the time. And every time I see them, I feel like I need to take a shower after it because it's just making me feel bad. Well, you should probably lean away from that relationship, whether in the time that you spend with them or in the actual energy that you open up to them, and your life will improve.
Interestingly, in the book on this concept, you make the danger zone quadrant, these people that you don't see very often, but when you do, it's a very positive thing. And you look up and it almost feels like you're saying the aha is if you have these people in your life that make you feel good, that are being positive, but you're not seeing enough, you got to make a change.
Yeah, I think a lot of life gets better when you just create a real top of mind awareness for these things that you already sort of know in the back of your mind. Because the truth is that awareness isn't particularly useful if you can't act on it at the testing point. Like if you can't go do something with the awareness was pointless. You know, knowing something in an abstract is not as important as knowing it in the moment when you can go and do something about it. So a lot of these exercises, these hacks, if you will, that's what it's really about. It's really about creating that top of mind awareness so that you can go and do something that improves the quality of your day-to-day life.
Love that. Okay, that's social. Now I get into mental wealth. What does that mean?
Mental wealth is all about really three things: purpose, growth, and space. Purpose, we know, this is about an understanding of some level of meaning to your life. The thing that you are waking up, the mattering, if you will, of like, who do I matter to? What am I going out and creating on a daily basis? What aligns my short-term actions with my long-term priorities? Growth is about an understanding of your ability to change. The fact that you are dynamic, that you can learn, that your competencies and capabilities are not static, that they can actually develop and that you can change. And then space is the third piece, and space is often overlooked. This is the idea that in order to make progress in life, in any domain, you need to be able to zoom out enough, to slow down enough, to see the bigger picture, to see where you are headed, to see the vision for that future, to see whether you're off course and that you need to make adjustments. And so the combination of those three things really creates this rich environment of what I think of as mental wealth.
So how would you go about that one? What's my trick to start? What's my hack?
The first thing I would do, anyone, is do what I call a think day. This is the idea of taking an hour, maybe 2 hours once a month. Get out of your normal environment. Don't do this at your office or at home because your thought patterns follow your environment. If you're in a familiar environment, you're going to have familiar thoughts. Go to a new space. Just disconnect. No phone, no technology. Bring a notebook, bring a pen, and just think on some of the bigger picture questions in your life. One of my favorite ones to ask is, if a third party were to observe me for a week, what would they say my priorities are? The recognition here is that there are two types of priorities in life. There are the priorities we say we have, and there are the priorities our actions show we have. Oftentimes, there's a big gap between those two things, and your life improves alongside your ability to close that gap. But the only way you can close it is if you know it exists in the first place. So zooming out to ask bigger picture questions like that creates this space. It creates a recognition of like, what are the things that I should be focusing on, that starts to align you with that purpose. It starts to create this growth in your life.
You know, I was reading Bill Gates took your thinking hour and turned it into a week. And had he not,
started
friends,
it.
Well, he would go to the cabinet. We would not have the Xbox today, which, by the way, gang, or let's just talk about it. The PlayStation 5 is infinitely better, but I don't want to offend anyone. We wouldn't have it today if he hadn't went off to the cabin for that week and thought and read the stuff that he hadn't been reading at work.
That's very true. Yeah, it was, The origin was in the 1980s. He started doing this, and he credits it with a lot of the most transformative innovations of Microsoft over that time, obviously becoming a multi-trillion-dollar company. The principle there is just that our power as human beings exists in the amount of space that we can create. Because when we slow down, when we can see the bigger picture, that's when we can take the right high leverage actions that create these big changes.
Friends, if you haven't listened to Kristen Cole's episode of this show, go back and listen to it. She actually schedules an hour in each of her days for thought and watched her world completely change. Her aha, Sahil, is that she was budgeting hour meetings all day long. And then she'd finish with the meetings with no time to think about any of the things she had talked about in the meetings. And before you know it, you're just running and gunning. All right, physical wealth. What is physical wealth?
Physical wealth is all about your health and vitality. It's about taking the controllable actions on a daily basis to fight against the natural decay and atrophy that your body goes through as you get older. It's about recognizing that your body is quite literally the house that you are going to have to live in for the rest of your life. And so prioritizing it, focusing on it, doing the things that you can do to make sure that that house is sturdy and strong into your old age is a really important ripple creating idea across all of the other areas of your life.
What's the first step you would take on that? I haven't given it thought in 20 years. What should I do tomorrow?
I would just think about it as a video game. So you talked about the Xbox. I really think that we live in this world where the information you receive from social media or the media in general is all about level 100 of all of these different games. So when you think about health, you're getting the Brian Johnson, Andrew Huberman, really complicated stuff about what it means to be healthy. The truth is that if you're just getting started, all you really need to think about is level 1. And level 1 is quite simply across 3 pillars. Movement, just move your body for 30 minutes a day. Doesn't matter what it is. Walk, jog, run, bike, hike, dance, whatever you like doing, just move. Nutrition, just eat whole unprocessed foods at about 80% of your meals. And then recovery, just try to sleep for 7 hours a night. If you can do those 3 things, you are going to be ahead of 80-90% of people. Very, very simple. Doesn't require any fancy equipment or a whole bunch of money to invest in it. But it will get you ahead if you're willing to just do those boring basics every single day.
I can't improve or even ask a follow-up question on that. Well played, sir. Now, you put financial wealth in the end of the book. And I'm wondering, when I read it, I'm like, this guy's a genius, because I came into it thinking about financial wealth as wealth. You've now laid out all these others. You have money at the front of the book and money at the back of the book. Why'd you do it that way? And what is financial wealth in your mind?
I really wanted to frame up the idea briefly in the front, as we talked about, but then go into depth in it in the back, particularly framed around the idea of this word, enough, of what it means to have enough financially. And the reason I did that is because I wanted people to come into the financial wealth section with a clear sense of what the money is for. This is so simple, but it's something that very few people ever think about. You go on this journey to make a bunch of money. You're in real estate, you're in finance, you're doing all of these great things, you're chasing these ambitions. Fantastic. But when you ask someone what the money is for, what are you actually going and trying to build? What is the life you are actually trying to create? What does it look like? Not a number on a screen. Don't tell me 10 million, 30 million, 50 million, 100 million. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, where do you live? What are you thinking about? Who are you with? What are you working on? What are you able to do? Who are you having conversations with? What is the life you are actually trying to create? What is the money for? That's why I put it at the end, is because those first 4 areas of life frame that up for you. You should have a clear picture by the time you get to it of what the money is for. Now you can go out and take action to go and build that life, to go and make enough money to have that life that you've just designed for yourself.
That is such a big idea, man. And by the way, because it was a big idea, it was completely lost on me. I had no idea, but now this makes perfect sense, that if I go figure out my time wealth, my social wealth, my mental wealth, my physical wealth, I then have an idea of what I want my life to look like, and I can back into a number so it's not this abstract quest for more. Is it just as easy as sitting down and writing it out? What's the first step you would take?
Yeah, I have this exercise I think of as like the enough life visualization, right? Like typically when I ask someone what does enough mean, first off, what they think of is like that I mean it has to be, really Spartan or bare, like bare bones life. That's not what this is about at all. Your enough life could be multiple houses, right? Like being able to travel all the time, fly first class. Like my enough life, like I want multiple houses. Not because I want to flex on having multiple houses, because I want to create amazing experiences with people I love. That's what I really value. I don't care about watches.
You got a whole audience of the top real estate agents in the world, and we all own multiple houses. It's a real pain in the backside, my friend.
I believe that too.
Let me just, the beach house, total hassle. Every time it rains, I break out in a cold sweat, and I'm not within 2,000 miles of it.
Well, I'll keep that in mind then. We'll go with lakes instead of beaches, maybe.
But it makes perfect sense. The idea of enough isn't a limiting word. It's actually an expansive word.
Yeah, it's expansive in the context of your life, because the important point here is that it is yours. It is not about what anyone else tells you should want. It is about the life that you want, what you are trying to create. And for most people out there, one of the reasons you feel miserable, you feel like you're comparing yourself constantly, it's because you don't really know what you want. So you are just by mimesis grabbing onto what other people tell you should want. You're just chasing whatever more the world has told you that you should care about. And once you give that up, once you recognize what you actually want and you have a plan to go out and take action to go and create it, you are no longer insecure. You can go into any room in the world and feel perfectly comfortable with what you have and the path that you are walking. You no longer feel that keeping up with the Joneses, like, oh, why do they have this and I don't have it? Because that's not the game you're playing. You're playing your own game. And when you play your own game, you're on your own scoreboard. Your entire life looks different.
That's a big idea, man. It's a really big idea. All right, I want to switch gears. I love this, by the way, and I love how you laid it out. When I was halfway through with this book, and the aha that I had was, this thing is a beast. Like this is a dense book with models and systems that breaks really complex ideas into simple action steps, which I love. Someone not as positive as me could say, Sahil, you're the worst businessman in the world. You should have written 5 books, and you could have done the wealth time and the social and the mental. Dude, why put all this together into one voluminous book?
I did not want to do what everyone does when it comes to the category of nonfiction books, which is exactly what you said. It's write the 180-page, like bare bone minimum on a single topic. Candidly, publishers wanted me to do that. When I went and pitched the book originally, a whole bunch of publishers wanted to have meetings with me. I had a big platform, and they all came in and were like, it's too many things. Why don't you just focus on the one? And my entire point to all of them was, I don't want to write the book on the one. I want to write the book on the entire thing of building this whole life. Because I personally think that books have been written on every single one of these things. No one has written the book on the full thing. And that to me was the unique value proposition of pull all of this into a single place where like, you could buy this book and candidly, it probably replaces like 50 self-help books, self-improvement books that you have on your shelf. And I'm not saying that to criticize the other ones that are out there. There's some amazing self-improvement books, but this captures the essence of a whole lot of them into a single place where you can come back to it at different seasons of your life and experience it differently, and it'll still be relevant and useful to you.
I think that's brilliant. All right, man, you love real estate agents, which is an interesting thing because not everybody has that moniker. But you come hang out with us. You're hanging out with Keller Williams. You're coming to Mega Camp to hang out with agents and talk about their models. Dude, is it just entrepreneurs that you love, or does real estate hold a special place in your heart?
Well, a little bit of both. I mean, I have always believed, and this is a funny thing, right? There's this whole online discourse about owning versus renting homes, and the math and all of these different things. I cannot get across in words how much pride I feel in owning a home where I can bring together people that I love. The feeling that I get when I wake up on a Saturday morning and my parents are there playing with their grandson and I'm cooking breakfast for people in a house that I own, that I created with things that I have built, that to me, like that is peak life to me. And there's no math. Like, I can't do math behind that to tell you what it means to me, but it means a whole hell of a lot. And so when I think about people that are out there and empowering others to have that sensation, to feel that ownership, that agency over their life, which is what we talked about at the outset as the key to all of this in life, that is a really beautiful thing to me. And so on a deeper level, like I feel a real resonance with people that empower what I really do view as the American dream. And I think it's the American dream for a reason. This idea of ownership, agency, autonomy, really, really impactful on my own journey. And I want to see other people experience it.
I love it, man. We make the argument that there's no single decision quite like where you're going to live, because it impacts where you shop and where you go to school and the people you hang out with and the culture that's available to you and all of the different things. And so if you're unclear on where the best place to live is, you're going to end up with an unclear life around those things. But
not to mention, similar to having a child, I cannot think of something that focuses your energy and intensity more than owning a home. Like I would imagine, and I'm not sure if studies have been done on this. I'm going to go look because I think it's interesting now. I would guess that if you were to take a cross section of people before they have a kid and before they own a home and then after, and you look at their behaviors and their performance across a whole bunch of areas of life, that everything improves. Like you just think about your overall life, like how seriously you take yourself when you are a homeowner, when you are a parent, the focus that brings to the things that you're going and doing. People typically think, oh, I have a kid or I'm taking on this stress of a home. That's going to hurt me. No, it is a laser intense focus that it brings to the things and the hours that you are working.
Brilliant. All right, man. Look, the people love you, and the People's Podcast loves you, and they're going to want more of you in their head. And frankly, so do I. Where should we go if we need Sahil every day? I need more of it.
Well, I send out a newsletter 4 times a week. You can find that on my website. If you just go search my name and newsletter, you can find it. It's called the Curiosity Chronicle. Just under 1 million people read that 4 times a week. And then the book, obviously, The 5 Types of Wealth, you can get that on Amazon or anywhere books are sold, your local bookstore, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Target, all around. Dude,
it's awesome. You're like, my words, not yours. You're like a warrior, poet, monk, rich dude that somehow is all in the same body. And I think at different times, different ones of those come out. It is beautiful to listen and to watch. I love your heart. I love what you're doing for people everywhere. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much for the kind words.
He just gets it. He gets it so well that as he's explaining it, it almost seems like he could be thinking about something else, and it's still coming out as smooth and as elegant as ever. The thing that blows me away when I listen to Sahil is how clear he is that life isn't one-dimensional. It's multidimensional. It isn't any one of these things at any given time, which is the trick that life tends to play on us. It's all of these things together. And I heard a model that went through all 5, which number 1 is awareness. He makes the argument throughout the entire book that most people are wildly unaware of what's important to them in the 5 categories of life that matters most. The exercises that he laid out are all very simple, but they all have one thing in common. That step 1 is to document how you're living and thinking today in order to spend time thinking about what's bringing you joy and wealth within each of those categories. Then number 2 is simply eliminating the things that don't and working towards an end in mind that does. Gary Keller, and if you're new to the show, Gary Keller, together with Jay Papasan and Dave Jenks, wrote the book, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, which is the namesake for the show, makes the argument all the time that if you don't begin with the end in mind, you have no idea what you're actually building. See, that's a big part of what Sahil is telling us. The wisdom that he provides can't be understated. As a matter of fact, I can't overstate it enough. He's figured it out. He's figured out what matters most to him in each of the categories of life that drives us. Here's what I'm asking you. When you think about your life and you think about your time and you think about your relationships and you think about your mental state and your physical state and your financial state, are you clear on what the 1 or 2 things that matter most to you within each of these categories are? Or do you wake up in the morning and life is sort of like a junk drawer, which is you get what you get, and some days you feel good and other days you don't, and some days you feel on track and other days you don't, and some days you have an end in mind and other days you don't? Because here's what I know to be true. One day follows the next. That might be the most powerful force in the universe, and before you know it, you could look up and have the majority of your life behind you. Friends, here's what I take from Sahil. It is never too late to begin anew. Tomorrow could be day one. The question is, if it was, how would you use it? Go forth and do likewise.